welcome to our civil defence meeting. I'll open with Karakia for us. Father God, thank you for bringing us together here today. Thank you that we are in the privileged position to listen to our community and make decisions that keep our community safe in times when it is tough for us. Thank you that you have guided us through the last few days where we have seen the impact of nature here in our region, and we also ask that you stick with our Hawke's Bay whānau who are still in the middle of all of this. Amen. Okay, let's go to apologies. I welcome our committee members, Councillor Ani Pahuru-Huriwai and Councillor Rawinia Parata to us today. Thank you for joining us. We've got the lovely Ian Wilson online. Kia ora, Ian. How are you this morning? All good? And then we also have Ariana and Jean joining us. Good morning to everyone. So I don't see any apologies, but in that case, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can really see what goes on in my agenda. Any declarations of interest? No? Then I'm going to take you to page 4, which is the confirmation of our minutes. That was sent out way before and asking for feedback. Happy to move, Councillor Wharehina. Moved by Councillor Wharehina, seconded by Councillor Gregory. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Okay, let's go to our action sheet. It is just... Good morning, Winsley. It is just our mud volcanoes. The Gisborne Herald has arrived. We welcome you into the room. Hi, Zita. Hi, Winsley. What we are talking about is page 9, and that is our mud volcano. Dr. Murray, you want to give us just a quick update? I see it's due at the end of this.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I didn't quite anticipate whipping him straight away. And I'll actually turn around my page 9 so I can actually hear properly. Anyway, thank you.
That is just a one-pager to give some dwelling owners information about future mud volcano eruptions.
Yeah, we have, particularly now that we had a new mud volcano eruption occur just over a month ago up the Waimata Valley, which was larger than the last one. It's in progress trying to make up something which is going to be informative, particularly for Wheatstone Road residents, which is currently inactive but can become active again. That will be the largest number of dwellings that would be sitting on top of a mud volcano complex, so that is very relevant for them. But there are also some...
I'm just going to ask that you speak up significantly because I think our people online might struggle to speak.
Okay. The key area where is an issue is Wheatstone Road, where there are a significant number of houses sitting on top of the mud volcano complex, but we also have a number of rural houses sitting on top of them as well. So it would be tailored to inform that, but it hasn't been my top priority given all the other things going on.
Fair enough.
But I could, if I have time on a plane within a couple of weeks, probably bang something out which could be sent away.
So we might just put that due date out a little bit. Fair enough.
But my apologies, as in, there's been a few things on recently.
Whose phone just went? Anyway. Yes, did someone put their hand up? Councillor Tairāwhiti.
Yeah, Murray, that you said one up up Waimata Valley. There's another eruption a month ago. Is that at the same site?
It's one of our most active sites, and it last erupted in 2020.
So it's the same one.
Same one as 2020, different one from the one that occurred in 2018, which was a lot closer to a dwelling. The one in the Waimata Valley Road from a month ago, twice the size area-wise from the one in 2020.
All good, Councillor Tairāwhiti? Great. Okay, we move into our first report. If there are no more questions, it's page 11, councillors. So this is something new. This is what the government has spoken about as well, and you have discussed it at your key committee. So I will hand over to Ben to talk to us about the establishment of a New Zealand Rapid Response Team in Tairāwhiti. Thank you, Ben.
Morning everyone, and just check online. Councillor Parata, if you just give me a thumbs up, you can hear me clearly. Thank you. I was told to talk to the sky, not to the people, so I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. The paper, I guess the genesis for this came out of really what we experienced last year, particularly the first quarter of last year. The New Zealand Response Team is a network, it is a formal structure for volunteers. It exists in a number of regions across New Zealand except ours. Really the premise in terms of going through the determination leading up to the recommendation that's tabled to you today is on the basis that really as a region, and particularly in the number of operational responses we've had and will continue to have, the ability to embed a trained, certified component element of our volunteers that we can bring under the CEDAM group umbrella to be a dedicated resource for two specific outputs. And the first one is for the either the surge to establish or set up a civil defence centre or civil defence led or community led centre. So that's where really you've got people physically being displaced from houses, seeking shelter, coming into a dedicated facility that caters for the aspects of sheltering people and equally in the way that we maintain those sites. So that's one output. Equally, they would be part of that surge, helping with that setup for whānau to then come in and activate and then would regroup back to be available for additional tasking. The second key role really for this, and it reflects really the hazard scope of our region, which is the flooding risk, particularly with our flood catchments across the Waimata, Waipawa, and obviously our flood catchments up the east coast there. So the second output, and these are formal outputs for a response team, is for flood response. And that's where they would be configured to either deploy assets or assist with evacuations, working with emergency services. But the critical thing for both outputs is that the certification or the requirement to get certified aligns to the competency and training framework that's run in place with NEMA. So the recommendations that are put forward is really, as the background as I've provided within the paper, is to seek approval for the establishment of that conditional to the determination of the business case and securing funding for that. Now, a key person I've got online that's just joined us is Liz Smith. So Liz led the initial scoping for firstly the overview of what an NZRT is, and really also partnered with KEG, which Nadine in the KEG committee were taking through really the basis in terms of what our establishment would look like. Also, in terms of consultation, developing this, certainly working with some of the iwi, with the Emergency Services Collective as well, because if we are looking to establish a professionalised group of volunteers, that shouldn't be at the detriment where we've got existing volunteers, for example, working with FENS. I'm reasonably confident that we can coexist in that space, and if anything, it's complementary to what our first responders will have as a first and primary response function. Firemen dealing with putting sandbags in the back of people's yards really shouldn't be their primary function when this is a team that would do it. Ironically, well, for those that certainly if you cast your mind back to Cyclone Gabrielle last year, we still had house fires. So it wasn't all about flood response or dealing with water. We still had primary outputs for our first responder group then. So I guess the variation to the theme in terms of what I proposed within the draft is on page 15. The structure, as it comes under the CEDM group, it means that it's a trained and formed entity of volunteers that we have within the CEDM group structure. The makeup for that, really, we're looking to certainly incorporate and integrate really our iwi within the context of having a formed, professionalised volunteer group. And that's very much a theme. If you've seen the recent reports, the Bush report, the Mataparai Government Inquiry report, there certainly is an appetite in terms of volunteers. This is not spontaneously activating. This is where we can actually have a trained state of people who can actually put themselves into the sort of scenarios that we often don't ask people to do. And I think that's quite a key component of what and why this seeks to take this approach in. So the team, as a team, but would be looking at 3 locations, and the biggest critical risk for us in terms of our catastrophic risk is where we have our centre of mass of the population, which is here. Often over the oversight, you see a funding bias, and I would state we have a funding bias going to the region, but we have your 38,000 people concentrated in one location. We don't often see really what takes into account how we can best support our urban population. Not downplaying the fact that we certainly have the challenge of supporting our rural and remote communities, but we've led quite a few projects now in terms of resourcing them with capability. So we just need the sort of balance of the scales to come into that. My team, in terms of a role, I would be proposing, which is an additional, there's no additional cost to that. It's a role that I have already. Would provide the team management and admin oversight for the contact of those teams, and they, with Liz, who's provided some previous background with these, some of these are quite very engaged individuals when we get them into the right space there. I mean, meet weekly, Liz, and really we find it's not a challenge in terms of trying to attract people in there. But the city will have a resource component required, and really once we land on the physical location where that and how they're housed there. Overall, one of the key risks we have, and there's 2 scenarios, and if you're listening to the news this morning, you would have heard one of those scenarios around someone in their car who required someone to get them out of there. Now that is what I classify as a situational aspect of response. That's you're driving past something, someone's in imminent dire need of assistance. You're going to render that on the basis that the human condition will see you respond to that. The second scenario, however, is quite significantly different, and this is where it induces the Health and Safety at Work Act, particularly where your overlapping PCBU obligations are. And this is where you're getting groups that are self-resourcing to self-deploy without the direction of an emergency service or under the framework of an emergency response. What that induces there is people putting themselves, because they've got equipment, into positions where they aren't actually trained and actually induce significant risk not only for themselves but potentially for what they're looking to do then. And that's probably my final outtake on this, that this provides really a mechanism that we can still capture the intent of what our whānau want to do, but bring them under the umbrella where you've got a trained, certified, competent group of people that you can at least have hand on heart they can be operating in that adverse or austere environment to be able to actually safely carry out that function. So I won't go any further than that. The rationale I've put in there.
Ben, you did mention that this is across the country in some places already. So I was thinking maybe asking of Liz if she's okay, just to tell us how it's working in other places. Good morning, Liz.
Kia ora, good morning everyone. So there's a number of different ownership models. So most of the teams are owned by a local or regional council and managed that way. There's a few teams that are an independent trust or society with a service level agreement with their local council who provides most of their funding, but they also do some sponsorship and grants. And there's a university-owned team as well. So there's a couple in Auckland, Bay of Plenty, Palmerston North, Wellington, Canterbury, Nelson, Marlborough. So there's still some parts of New Zealand that don't have a response team, but a lot of these teams also have an out-of-region capability where they can be self-sufficient for 72 hours as a team and deploy to other regions as well. All 16 of the teams have just had national accreditation visits, so we do an assurance process to make sure that these teams are operating and meeting best practice and minimum standards, and that's so that our partner agencies have assurance that they can task these teams safely and effectively, so they can provide surge support when emergency services are stretched.
Awesome, thank you for that, Liz. Okay, can I open the report for questions? Councillor Pahuru Huriwai, you go first.
Morena tātai. Thanks, Ben, for that information on the response team. In regards to the rural teams, so is the expectation that that team of 6 would then train other community members across the, say, north of Ruatoria or north of Uawa? Or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's I guess if expanding the team, it's the resource bill that comes with it. But the intent, much as you're touching on, if I understand your question, is around if we're looking to embed the trained level of competence for people to be able to operate, there should be a trickle down around how they can bring people into that as well. Really, step 2, which is progression from here on the assumption that it does get approval with the conditional aspects being in place there, that would be part of the business case working with Liz, and Liz will has put a hand up to help but lead us through that around really the actual overall framework for how we can incorporate or enhance. One thing I would mention with regards to that, and currently we have a 3-day hui with DPMC underway, really doing the review of the government reviews, and this component, particularly on the back of the outcomes of those reviews and the events last year, and for us, we've had events well before last year, this is quite a key theme in terms of the deliberate enablement of community for response. So I think we've actually got an opportunity here. We had this well underway before, obviously, the reviews have come out, but it just means that there's some degree of validation to the approach. It's really how we can configure that regionally to be responsive and in the way that we need to be able to deploy people under this umbrella.
Councillor Parata, thank you.
Morena tātou. I think it's important to acknowledge how far we've come, the fact that now we're starting to think about the health and safety of our volunteers and people across the emergency management space and into the region. I think that's way ahead of where everyone else is thinking. So I really want to congratulate Ben, yourself and your teams for being able to be in this point where we can think a bit more long term and a bit more strategically about emergency management and how that's done. My main questions were around finance and how this is going to be financed. I can see that in the report it says that this is not the space for it, that we're really just thinking, is it a good idea? Do we support it? I personally think that this is the opportunity to grow some really professional, experienced emergency management people that are based across Te Tairāwhiti. I was very happy to see Pātutahi being included in that, and would like to see, if it's possible, maybe 1 or 2 more based up the coast. The resources that we have up the coast when we're so vulnerable are so important. Just as an example, yesterday the 35 was closed. It wasn't closed for a long time, and the surface flooding receded pretty quickly. The point is that at one point we were cut off from one another. So ensuring that there are resources and people, trained people, good people, professional people based on either side of where those cuts are, I think is important. But other than that, I'm happy to move the paper.
Thank you for that, Councillor Parata. Councillor Wharehinga and then Councillor Gregory.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm happy to second the paper. I agree with the paper. It's a great paper. I think I agree with how we're providing structure for our regions and for our volunteers. And reflecting back on what we went through during this last year, I just remember the workload that a lot of our volunteers in our community had to carry. So I would like to understand how we will manage over-obligating our volunteers, and that, because everybody's so busy, we all have lots on. We don't also want to then over-obligate the volunteers to feel like this is another 40 hours, something on top of the 40 hours and the family obligations and things like that. So I'll hand that over to you to respond to before I carry on.
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of the logic for having a team or three team locations is that, apart from our worst case, which is a complete regional response, i.e. a Gabrielle response, you're going to have more than likely then all three of those teams active at any one time. To be honest, that even for maintaining response for coordination is a significant undertaking as well. But any other scenario other than that, really the logic there is that we've got to be post, if that is the area that is in contact, the other two teams would configure to be either relief in place or a surge capacity then to actually relocate to go and support them. It's great in terms of Councillor Parata's feedback around the requirement for more, but obviously more means resource. And that's really what, certainly the key critical step for us is with the determination for the business case resourcing, that ongoing OPEX for managing that. Some of what we're looking to do is if you recall, for those who've been here, the rural fire used to be under council. Now those assets were taken across the fence. So as an example, really, we've got an opportunity with what's been divested back to council, which are double cab 4x4 trucks, to actually bring those back in, and we can repurpose those to be really part of that. That'll offset a significant amount of capex for purchase, but we're obviously still going to need to look at other aspects relevant to specialist resource. The training bill was covered by NEMA. That's a real plus with this whole thing. The training is delivered to a competency framework that's funded nationally. And that's really, I'll put in the tucky down for groups that have a view around doing their own thing. This will be accommodating to get everyone onto the same sheet of paper.
Nice. The other thing I wanted to ask was, again, in line with what Councillor Parata was asking, on page 15, I see Patutahi there. Are we able to include also another area like TK that was affected in regards to being able to mobilise as well? I understand this is draft, so I'm assuming that you're wanting to hear the perspectives of councillors, so I was wanting to know if we were able to include them.
It is draft, and to be honest, I've put a tidbit down if the desire and the appetite is to see really probably a couple more locations. That has to be part of what we take through for the, what is the aspect of the business case for them.
The other thing I wanted to ask too, and you touched on it, was, actually not ask, but kind of state, you touched on it in regards to resourcing. I agree with building up the capacity around the city, because we do have the majority of our population residing here. But also on the flip side of that, I am completely comfortable, and I know this is just about structure, but when we start talking about resourcing, I'm completely comfortable for the spend in the rural areas to be higher per capita, like how the majority, like how 80% of our road intake is spent out in the rural areas, but 50% of it is taken from the city, because to me the city has close proximity to a lot of the services, therefore the cost to deliver those services is lower, the cost to fill that emergency gap is lower. Emergency resilience building in the city, I feel, is also the same as what it would look like out in the rural areas. The rural areas have requested more water tanks. I think we need to start looking at things like that for in the city, etc., etc. But yeah, it'll be nice if the per capita spend is higher in those areas, just due to the fact that we're further away from our resources, from our services.
I think that's certainly aligns with what we see. The challenge of supporting rural and remote, particularly how easily they are cut off. I think we're almost at a very comfortable level of funding that's going out there, because there's another tranche of funding now that Sir Selwyn is leading. It's another $1.4 million into areas there. But really, if you underscore and you go back to really when your city's in problem, you've got real problems.
100%.
We were really for a significant number of weeks running with a 1.5 days worth of water supply. With really, if we lost our secondary, then we didn't have any water. So that's just taking that logic for us. We can now probably be a bit more inclusive. And equally, that's something we're eminently working on to resource the city team in terms of being able to have emergency water treatment as one of their outputs. And that'll be something I can secure and develop as part of that brief back in terms of what this can look like.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. On page 12.3, it says about the NZRT elements from outside who have been deployed during Hale and Gabriel. Is that the RRP? I went out to the sandbagging. No, different. I'm a bit confused.
That's a volunteer group
Okay.
that gives water and stuff.
Yes, the RRT is the Rapid Relief Team. That's the Brethren Church, which is an excellent organisation. This aligns to the national framework for the trained teams we had, and one of those was from Wellington, coming, and equally with the police and the additional fires.
Thank you. I was very impressed with that RRT during that time. They did
Thank you. Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, when I read this originally, I was sort of a little bit concerned that potentially there was another group being set up in isolation. And one thing that came out of the cyclone, which we hadn't seen that scale, was the real need to have a real coordinated structure. And I think we have to have one lead as far as it comes to emergency that is directing, and everyone knows what the left hand is doing. So I wouldn't want this to be, I'm pretty adamant that it should be part of the civil defence and not another group sitting over here that's there to call on if and when, because we had a group set up in this room, which I ended up being part of it. I walked in it a long time, co-opted, where that was about identifying where everybody in the rural region was, and because we had civil defence people coming from Christchurch, but they don't know our area, and finding. So those type of things, that really brought it home to me, is that sort of a thing is pretty important, but it has to be coordinated as part of not sitting in isolation and be around the table, because there were so many instances there where helicopters were sitting there waiting to go and they couldn't find stuff, didn't know how to get hold of a generator, whereas there's local people there. We found a guy in town with a container of generators just sitting there. So I think it's just a real great opportunity, but I don't want it to be bespoke of anything. I think it needs to be, anything like this needs to be through Ben, and it's a coordinated structure, otherwise we'll end up, and we don't want to end up in a position, we had the position at Karakia where people thought they were left and, cut off and whatnot, and didn't know. Well, we actually have got a civil defence representative out there. So I think that needs to be almost part of building more capacity around that. And it may be 5 people out there type thing. So I just want it to be a coordinated thing whereas if the communications like last time weren't, and we couldn't actually contact them, but that team is more than capable of picking up and running. Because you don't want to end up with that situation again where we end up with a whole lot of individual groups running around. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand does. These people are getting frustrated because they know how to solve this problem really quick, but this group doesn't communicate. So I think that's a great opportunity, but I want it to be really cool through civil defence.
Before I give Councillor Parata the right of reply, I just thought my comments on this, Ben, isn't it great to be in a position where we are now to lift our gauge after what we've been through, and also after seeing the reviews, especially the Sir Jerry Mataparai review, where, as always, we learn from what we see, but taking the stuff that we did well there and carrying that forward. So this is a fantastic opportunity to be strategic going forward, because we do know stuff are going to come our way again, and every time we get the opportunity to refine and fine-tune. And I see this as another tool in our toolbox to make sure, comes something our way, we have thought it through, what worked last time, what did not. How do we make sure we look after our volunteers? Because we do want people to feel equipped as well. We do not want to put people in harm's way. So for me, this is a great opportunity for us to make sure we are match fit next time. So thank you for that. I will ask Councillor Parata, you have moved the paper, so you have a right of reply to finish us off before we put it to the vote. Thank you.
Oh, ka pai ngā mihi, just a couple of things that I didn't quite pick up and I wanted to, but I suppose they've kind of been brought up already, is that community, particularly rural communities and Māori, predominantly Māori communities will respond no matter what. So just ensuring that they have the support and the training. And I really think that this is the space in which we can really build some bridges and some good relationships with iwi and with hapu, because when we look for volunteers, it's a very easy thing for iwi and hapu to acquire committed, dedicated, available volunteers. Council itself can't really get the same response that iwi get. So this is, I think, a way for us to build those relationships better and stronger. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. This paper has been moved by Councillor Parata, seconded by Councillor Wharahinga. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Liz. Okay, let us move to our...
Just with regards to the
Yes.
time frame for the business case and preparation, if we're September, I think, in terms of our next group week.
Yes.
I would really like to progress this on the basis that Liz and I can pull this together. If we did an extraordinary aspect of pulling that business case through.
Speak up.
We did an really broader time frame forward to present back specifically on the business case there. I just wonder, within the context of meeting schedules and agendas, how we would...
We're aiming for September. Are you saying you're aiming for September?
Trying to do it earlier than that.
Earlier than that. Yeah. Yep, all good. You know what needs to be done in order to do it properly, so you will let us know. Thank you for that. Okay. Then we're going to move to your report. I'm going to open it up for you to talk to your report, councillors. That is page 31. And then we will open it up for questions. The floor is yours, Ben.
Thank you, Worship. I guess this period, probably one thing that stands out for myself and my team is, up until yesterday, this has been the longest period we've actually not had any aspect of response. That in itself probably doesn't seem like much, but it's certainly afforded us really the opportunity to start, I guess, in terms of reviews, much as there's national and regional reviews, is really looking at the aspects of how that continual improvement process, which is always an aspect of what we seek, is around improving connectivity, relationships. We've certainly got resource, as we mentioned, within the different funding streams that are becoming available, and really that continual pursuit of really developing the relationships relevant to the structure. So thank you for the endorsement for the NZRT. I think that will serve us very well in terms of getting that business case together to really spread across the region. We have, as you've been no doubt aware, the various commentaries around the reviews. Certainly a lot of those themes predate either the Bush report or the Matapara report. They are things that go back to the original TAG review back to 2019. So I guess where the Minister's focus is, and hence the hui I've been on for the last day and the next 2 days, is around reviewing those reviews to get a consolidated aspect of what the sector, the emerging sector in the regional sense, are looking to take forward and engage with that consultation process. We certainly have a lot of, much as the Worship alluded to, the outtakes of things that perhaps are strengths for our region. One of those is relationships. The other is really, unfortunately, the operational benefit of being operational. And that means that really we're not academically working out how to do our craft. We are doing the DUI because we actually are required to do that of necessity. So the upside of that really is we certainly have a voice at the table. We might be a small region, but we certainly, in terms of experience, we did host the Zone 3 mayors and CEs, and that was a very successful visit. Gave them a look under the hood in terms of what and how we come together with the structure. And equally, we've got further follow-up visits from Reporting Council and the others as well. A couple of enhancements we have, and I'll just move to page 33, an FM radio broadcast. So our version of Bevan for breakfast will be Kumi for breakfast. But really looking to work with Bevan, what we have is a FM broadcast facility now at the centre, and that really will allow, if we don't lose our radio station link here in town, I can either bring the DJ down to the centre, but running a scheduled aspect of another mode of communication for, for failover option from data, either social media or website. The other points really, probably the key one we've got coming up, there are a number of points here, but I'll just bring out the salient ones. Exercise the Rū Whenua. That is an activation of the National Catastrophic Plan for the Alpine Fault. Our context for that same event is the Hikarangi Magnitude 9 event. What NEMA are doing is having prioritised now the catastrophic event scenario planning around the seismic zone for the South Island. Will be their first national hit out at really exercising the system. And for us, we'll be activated not so much in a primary impact as a region. It's modelled to be very much a secondary or support region for what the South Island will be taking that initial scenario for. The sort of scenarios for us will be based on a welfare focus, probably taking displaced people, internally displaced people out of the South Island and accommodating them into the region here. We're going to exercise a part of that with the second iteration of Rū Whenua, where Dallas and the Welfare Coordination Group, under the auspices of the CEDAM Group, will be looking at really a live aspect component of testing and turning on one of our welfare centres for that. And actually, Dallas had the Welfare Forum, National Regional Welfare Forum yesterday, so it's a good opportunity to get people around that sort of kaupapa as well. Myself, I did escape the region for 2 weeks, and I was privileged to travel to Seattle with the Joint Centre for Disaster Research, and George Reedy kindly offered a place with the Tairāwhiti component of that team. So the key thing for there, and I'll do a detailed report on this, it was visiting the First Nation Indian tribes within the Washington state. Very similar in terms of hazardscape, significant tsunami risk based on the Cascadia fault. The tribes in the iwi context is their own sovereign entities. To some similarities around how and what they do there, but different aspects around how regionally they prepare for that as a state. Certainly the outtakes, what I drew from my experience and feedback there, was the manner in what we do here is actually we're on the right, very much on the right level of engagement, and the resourcing now takes it beyond the next step. Move across to page 34. There is the statement there with tsunami evacuation zones. If you are familiar with those, you notice that the public-facing zones are tricoloured. They're red, amber and yellow. Really the national, in terms of sort of make that a bit more understandable for the public, because that'll be adopted as a blue zone. We'll be putting a communications campaign in terms of driving that. Hopefully coincide that with the National Shakeout campaign for September. As a region, we do very well for that event. So that would be an opportunity to link the tsunami hazard risk and really what we're putting as the safety or the front-facing safety signage, etc., for the public into that campaign. The emergency management bill, if you were aware, has been obviously in the context of the reviews and where the Minister sees really a requirement to do a refresh on that. So that has been after we was going through for the draft stage and is going through very much a reset based on the outcome of the reviews and developing a fit-for-purpose system for New Zealand across all hazards. Natural hazards, extreme weather projects. Dr. Cave presented on a couple of these. I'd probably ask Murray just to talk to the evacuation modelling for Te Karakia. It's indicative of some of the work we've got going in the recovery space, but also the review of the aspects of the floodplain modelling and the flood plan. So Murray, if you're able to give us a heads up on that.
Yes, through the chair. Part of the funding for that, we did two specific things. One was the review of the flood warning manual, which was obviously critical during an event anyway. But the other one was to look at guidance for flood survivability based on water depth, water velocity. As part of that project, we looked at a modelling of evacuations in Te Karakia to see whether or not essentially the decision making made on the day at an individual level would be correct or would put people in harm's way, and whether or not any evacuation zones that we had identified were actually appropriate. What the modelling through software called Riskgate identified was that some areas where people evacuated were probably risky, but it also identified that the designated evacuation site on the hill opposite was in actual fact the most optimal site to go to and the least risk. And so from that point of view, it validated a more practical way of actually looking at how we and where we had people evacuate to. But it does highlight, one, a bit of an education campaign so people do understand that that is the safest place to go. And likewise, probably ensuring that that site is actually capable and prepared to accommodate a township like Te Karakia when that needs to happen and with what sort of level of preparedness that site would require. The work's still in progress. We wanted some fine-tuning because there were some special circumstances around the total overall modelling that we wanted to actually tease out. One is that the ability to evacuate in any flood event is really governed by the weakest member of a cohort, be that a family or an extended whānau group. And where you have woody or other debris in that evacuation pathway, then the risk to life goes up exponentially. So that's something to tease out. But the other element where this work had been done internationally didn't really take Gisborne Tairāwhiti's health statistics into account. We have a different profile for health for our community compared to even nationally, and so we're actually trying to integrate that into the curve, but overall it actually makes the risk higher for our whānau. And the other thing that then spun out of that was the issue of another event. If we have houses that are raised above Gabriel flood height, but the next one is worse, and there are still properties at risk, the opportunity to evacuate might have actually gone, but shelter in place may be also risky. So that's something that needs to be teased out further, but probably will be another project.
Okay, let's open the floor for questions. Are you happy for us to ask questions in regards to, so councillors, page 31, Ben's report. If there are no questions, I'm very happy. It's a thorough report. Thank you, Ben, for giving us an update. 37 paragraphs worth of updates, everyone's different activity that we have seen. I'm very happy to move Ben's report. Seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. If there are no more questions, did you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, sorry. Through your worship, there is the NEMA update that's attached to that report.
Yes, I've got that. I wrote here Ian's comments, question mark. So Ian, we will come to you now before we move this paper. I did have it separately, but thank you for that. Mr. Ian Wilson, the floor is yours. Thank you for the director's statement that is in our agenda, and we will ask you just to comment and highlight some things out of that report for us.
Thank you, Your Worship, and aroha mai. My apologies for not being there. Unfortunately, my calendar failed to oblige and let me know that there's a meeting there. In respect to the report, Ben's raised most of it. Look, the emergency bill, the Minister's aiming to get that up and done by the end of next year, 2025, so he's hoping to have one out by then. So that has been given, I guess, quite a lot of precedence at the moment and being worked on. The government inquiries are out. As you're aware, Sir Jerry Mataparai's report's there. Our response is being led by DPMZ, Sean Bolton, and he, at the moment, is reviewing those recommendations, and he's going to prioritise them and have a report back to government by June, with a further report back to government in September, looking at how the resources will be met for some of those priorities. But we will also be engaging with the sector on that as well. One thing to note, we are also working with Starlink. We now have the ability to provide or sell space on Starlink's network at a better rate than what they have. We are also looking at getting the flexible hardware options available to the groups, i.e. you can look at a fixed asset for a community, or you can get mobile assets as well, and you can get either a stationary low model, or you can get a high performance model for your CDCs or your EOCs. We are looking at the moment in respect to the legal obligations there and indemnities. So we won't roll that out until we've probably got a $10 million indemnity to cover everyone. And that's being tested legally. We'll also test the systems to make sure they're available, but we're aiming to, I guess, have all this done by August with go live in September, but we'll work with you on that as well. The other really important bit is we're running the emergency mobile alert this Sunday. So your phones will go mad somewhere between 6 and 7 p.m, sorry. So if you're serving tea at that time, you're going to be at least advised it's coming in. And Ben's raised all the others that are there. And you also have, Dave's reinstituted the report that he's going to put out to the KEG chairs as well. It's a long time coming, but KEG chairs and groups wanted it, and he's decided that it's a really good aspect that we need to get out in the director's statement. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
And we do have a question from Councillor Pahuru-Huriwai. Thank you.
Kia ora, Ian. Thank you for that. Just pricked my ears up on the Starlink stuff. So I know one of the issues that we had crossing Aotearoa Pro really was the issue of paying for them with a credit card to activate the Starlinks, and then while they're not on contract, the ongoing monthly costs or the ability to quickly fire them up in an emergency situation, that there kind of needs to be some training around how that can happen, how that happens, because it was a big problem when all the Starlinks went out. Nobody had a credit card to, and then if you did have a credit card, it would only allow you to connect to one device. So any thoughts around how that problem might be resolved?
We are definitely aware of it through you, Madam Chair, and that's one of the reasons why we've actually picked up the ability to sell the network from NEMA. Not only that, one of the programs that we're offering, it will cost only $70 a month to stay on. So it's far more beneficial to the groups, and the cost will be a lot less than what they are at the moment. But these things we've still got to work through.
Thank you for that. Any more questions or queries? Councillor Parata, thank you.
Just going on from that Starlink issue around the credit card, there was often a delay in working with Elon Musk and his team. So you'd put your credit card in, and then you'd refresh. It may or may not go through. And then that was the same issue when everyone had turned it off after the event and then tried to restart it. So there are disruptions in service. The fear is, now that we've got the hardware, in the emergency when we need it the most, how will we activate it? So really, I don't know whether or not NEMA had experienced that, but I knew, particularly up the coast, that all of us, once we got the hardware, which we thought was going to be the hardest thing, it was actually getting the service and then turning the service on in a timely manner. Yeah.
No, we are aware of that, and that's one of the reasons that we stepped into the arena, I guess, also to get better prices. Look, I'll have a chat with the operations guys. Prior to this all being rolled out, we will actually make sure there's a presentation of everyone of how you're going to do it, the systems in place, how they're going to be there, how you're going to pay for it and monitor it. And that's also one of the clauses, the indemnity clauses we're looking at with Starlink at the moment. So we won't be rolling it out until we're really sure legally that it's functional and its ability to be met.
Awesome, thank you for that, Ian. Any more questions, Ben?
This is a very operational conversation, but I'll just to put in context where we are today with regards to Starlink. So we do have them out there. Where we have communities or individuals with those, if we ask them to turn them on, particularly with the incoming severe weather event, the undertaking I've given is that the unit, if it's required to be activated and it's on the dormant plan, is that we would cover the activation, which would cover the 1 month payment for that. That just means until whatever the plan that Ian or NEMA come through with, we've got a workaround relevant to the fact we can still activate those. So community have them. Most of those are on plans that those units are parked and they are on plan, but they're asleep. We need them, and saying we're 5 days out from another Gabrielle or a significant event, that pre-contact with the community is like, turn it on now. It gives us the 4 days or so where we've got the time to configure. And then the billing that will start from the fact that it's been activated will be something that Civil Defence will cover back. There'll be a reimbursement recovery we can do.
One of the other things I should have said, Madam Chair, that anything that's arranged will actually go through the group and through Ben anyway. We won't be going outside the structures that we work with.
Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, sorry, this isn't so much for Ian. Just going back to something Murray touched on before around the likes of the evacuation for Karakia, but this needs to go right across the whole area. With the raising of these houses, I think we need to make it very clear that that is an avenue that's more or less an avenue to protect property, but not so much protect people, because this can lead people into a real false sense of security, as in, oh yeah, our house is now higher than what the flood was, so we'll just stay here. I think we need to make that very clear, that this raising of houses has been to protect your property, but at the same stage, evacuation is get to higher ground, and because trying to go and then rescue people who have stayed there because they are safe then puts a whole lot of people at risk. So I think that's one big story we need to make sure we sell pretty.
Okay, if there are no more questions or queries, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour? Aye. Contrary, carried. Okay, councillors, we are going to hand over to Rod Himpton, who will talk to us about recovery update, just a high-level recovery update. So, Rod, I'll hand over to you, and Tim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you. Tim and I will tag team this, but we've got a report there. I'll just quickly, briefly go through the points, and then we'll head to a presentation where we'll both tag team on that process. You'll see there in the front our overall risk status is amber. Mostly the reason around that is as we define projects and we continue to work through, especially across a lot of the roading projects, and we define the scopes to turn them and really work out what we're doing, you'll see those then change to green. So most of those are in that state because of the scoping of projects and understanding the severity of what we're working through on that process. You'll see fossil there is green, although that may change in the next couple of weeks, but the Cat 3 projects is going to be going well, and we'll talk about that, where we're up to in our presentation. Flood resilience, the stop banking work is forging ahead. I mean, it's obviously stopped over the last couple of days, but the kind autumn to us gave us another 4 weeks of work that we didn't plan to get done, so we've got ahead there. The road network, you'll see Dave Wilson's been appointed to help come back in and manage that and report to Tim on that work and how that works, so that's been a good process there. Community-led projects, we'll talk a lot more about that in our presentation. Again, woody debris, we saw our beaches clean, but this morning they're all back to where they were. A lot of woody debris came down the Waimata last night, and so that. And Tairāwhiti Road, we've got an update in our presentation around that, but both between Tim and Dr. Murray are well across where that project's heading at the moment. In general, in our report here, we are talking about going back to DPMC for some more funding for recovery, for the Recovery Office, and what that looks like. We are working around how we transition back into BAU. A lot of the functions that we are doing in recovery, if it wasn't for fossil or woody debris, most of those roading projects all sit within our business BAU team, and Tim is working with his team on how to scope that up and work through a transition process to put that back into business as usual and what that looks like. We've formed a steering group which has got Duncan Gibb on it and Bruce Robinson, who's our independent chair for risk and independent advisor. And Duncan Gibb has certainly been involved with SCIRT and then Kaikoura with recovery. So we've got those guys in there to help guide us from a high level. They don't have decision making, but they have recommendations on how we actually operate and can actually recommend things back to come to councillors for decision making. But having that set up has given us a good governance around how we manage that process. We then go on and talk about the transition that I've spoken about, and fossil and flood resilience. But I'm happy to talk to those through the presentations because we've got far more detail in our presentation around those projects. Before we go to the presentations, one of the things we were asked for last time when we presented was more finance information, and that came to Councillor Gregory. We are working with finance on that on a program by program basis. We should be able to get to you that before the next meeting, so we may send that out to as just a document giving you an update of where they are from a financial point of view across those things. Thank you. Thank you.
If I can just jump into before the presentation, just so that councillors are aware that the Recovery Steering Group has been operative since February, so it's not just established.
Yeah. So we're in our 4th meeting, I think.
Every month.
Every chair. Yeah. Okay,
let's do the
Let's
presentation.
Go. So there we are. We've been through the risks there again, but where we are with those, and again, we will talk about each one of them through this process. So fossil, which is lifting houses, you'll see there that we've actually, if you go to the right there, we've got 63 properties in Cat 3. 12 of those are mana whenua, and 51 of those are council, privately owned ones that we're actually working through to buy out. It's fair to say the mana whenua process is still not, whenua Māori process is still not confirmed, and working through that is with DPMC. So that has been a bit of a frustration for some of those, for those organisations and people being affected by that. Negotiations have started on the Cat 3 properties. Commercial silt, we've actually worked through our commercial silt. We've got extra 5.6 million from government, and we have paid out 97% of all applicants, which was a great outcome for us, and we're working through those. There's one late applicant that actually missed, it actually got put into the system, but it never got carried forward, so that's the only applicant that needs to be come through the steering group. You'll see there on Cat 2 lifting properties, there's 147 that are in this categorisation. 64 have applied to their house to be lifted, 33 are being done by Mahaki, and 50 are still in the feasibility stage of actually applying for their funding. But I think, just to go back to Councillor Tairāwhiti's point around lifting houses, because we're lifting them 500 mil above flood height, I think it is really clear that that messaging is around we're protecting the house, not the people, because as Dr. Cave alluded to, is that extra 500 mil may be the difference of getting out of the house safely or not getting out of the house safely. So there's a bit more messaging on that. Cat 3 buyout, as we said, there's 66, but they're broken down between whenua Māori land and us. But you'll see there that the yellow one is negotiations underway. There's 23. The buyouts have agreed, so we've already agreed to buy out 13. So by the end of this month, we will own 13 houses around the town. And then the next 23 are actually working through the process. Settlements completed on this one were 8, but by the end of the month, we'll have 13. And the buyer offers are made as 6. So out of all of those, if you add those up, we're well over 50% of agreements of where we're working on the process. So that's going well with the team. And the feedback generally, we've got a couple of people that have gone through to seek an independent valuation. So they've got a valuation, we've got a valuation, we couldn't get agreed. So they've now gone to get an independent valuer. There's been 2 of those so far. We think we'll get up to 3, but most of the people have been very acceptance of the process and where we are and supportive of council in that. The risks to the fossil project are obviously the valuation challenges resulting in higher valuations, but as I said at the moment, we've only sort of got 2 of those. There's no funding available here for Cat 2 land stability properties. Now, we are working with government on that. We've actually at the moment got the Cat 2 lifting funding. We're actually looking at changing that to be this Cat 2 funding that actually will be able to scope that to actually be able to help those properties that are actually in the Cat 2 land instability. And Dr. Murray and Ian have been going out and visiting those sites every Friday and those people. And we are seeing a number of those properties actually come out of that Cat 2P land instability as land is settled down there. Another one of the risks is temporary houses for families as we go to lift the houses and moving the families out. So we need to work through that process, and we have been involved in conversations with central government departments to help us on what that looks like. Next step obviously is what do we do with the Cat 3 properties, and we're working through a plan with the Livable Communities team on what we could actually do with those houses and what that actually means. And we've sort of obviously got to start a demolition process of those houses. In only 6 of those houses that we believe out of the 53 are actually movable off-site. So that's actually, so this means that we've still got about 47 of them that will actually require demolition across the town. And what does that look like? Flood resilience, we've talked about the team working there, and Josh and the team, and the Karakia project that's actually happening. We actually had a flood modelling session with the Karakia community a month ago, which was partial flood modelling, where we showed them what the flood modelling looked like from a partial point of view. they have now gone away and confirming with individuals and residents on what we had in the flood modelling, they agreed with, and we're working through to confirm that flood modelling. And once that flood modelling then is confirmed, then we can look at what the design and go on to the next stages of development of design of them. But that project is going along really well with Josh and the team. They have, as I said, dry autumn's given them another month of delivery. Some of the risks though, as we do scope and get into more delivery of that project, is number of contractors. We only really have a couple of specialised contractors in that work, Tim, and working through that and getting tension in the tender box. Staff retention, obviously we've got a small team of experts there that we're relying on, because not only are that, the team is sort of working on their BAU as well, so we need to make sure we've got enough resource in there to help them on that. And on how the weather's packed in, obviously, we've gone from having a dust issue to it's been too wet now. Dust issue to being too wet, so we need to work through that. But obviously, to complete the upgrade sides of the Waipoa stop banks between the two and the town, and complete the raising of Kirkpatrick Road, which they're working through. I think Tim here around the Naloto.
I was enjoying that tag team. Working out quite well. Okay, so Tairāwhiti Road, as everyone's aware, we're trying to restore the corridor, and there's 3 bluffs in question. The solution that we're looking at involves navigating the first 2 bluffs by different methods, and that's being considered by the team. The third bluff, bluff 3, with the overhanging rock, is common to both solutions, so that is independently being progressed at the moment. So last week we began on site getting the roadway ready and having temporary stops during the day, and we ran into a few difficulties with cars that made it to the work site and had to be turned back to take Karakia Road as an alternate. In advance of this, we'd signalled to the community, we'd signalled to everyone running heavy trucks to reschedule their works or advance their works in advance, so that was all done. We'd also patched up Karakia Road as well, so it was in working order for this period of time. So works are underway. However, this week we're intending to start the scaling works for Bluff 3, so we can start removing the overhanging elements of that bluff. That's been put on hold for obvious reasons, just due to the weather. So the works on the site have just been slowed this week because of that. And that's pretty much the update with Tairāwhiti Road. Bridges and dropouts. Okay, so with the black bridges, so in total we've got over 80 damaged bridges, the most serious of which is we've lost bridges completely. We call them black bridges. We've progressed feasibilities for these, and we're working with the NZTA categorisation program to assess what we believe will be funded in this funding round, which will become clearer to us later in the year. We have confidence that a couple of bridges will be funded, and we're proposing to progress with the St Ledgers Bridge initially, so that will be coming up for approval shortly. And we're parallel estimating that particular project because we think we need to show intent in this space. We think the community needs to see action in this area, and we'll be bringing that to council. So that's where we're going on black bridges. Down the track a bit, there's bridges that don't meet that BCR requirement, so the business case expectations of Wakotahi and are potentially or unlikely to be funded. Another discussion needs to happen, other considerations need to happen with those bridges. In the background, we are doing work in that regard to suggest what might be offered in terms of alternates and levels of service. We're particularly influenced by the stakeholders or our customers who don't have easy or amenable alternatives, and of which we heard about recently in our 3-year plan deliberations. So red and orange bridges are underway, and as are green bridges. Green bridges I'll touch on first. They are relatively minor bits of work. The entire capital spend there is around the $1 million mark, and there's about 30 different bridges involved. So that's with already out to contract and already been undertaken. Red and orange bridges are progressing now. We've got about 7 suppliers in it, and the type and nature of the repairs needed on each of those bridges can be on the platform of the bridges, and sometimes can be in the approaches to the bridges. So those are being divvied out to those panel as per their specialties, and ensuring that there's a bit of attention and getting good value for money for that as well. And we have the Tairāwhiti pedestrian swing bridge reopened as well, which was a good tick forward. We were expressly asked by the community to have that back, and we were able to deliver that. As for dropouts, we've been concentrating this year on dropouts that fall under emergency management, because we've got till 30th of next month to do that at 100% funding. So that's been our priority. We recently have indicated that we'd be able to complete them on that time. I've had no update since, so I still expect us to complete the emergency works. And we've completed a re-inspection of the entire network. That was a body of work we just needed to do because of earlier errors in causing great difficulty in how and who and where we pay for particular dropouts, of which we've got more than 400, but some are funded related to particular storm events. Some are totally on us because they happen in an event outside a storm event, and we've had to recategorise that whole list, so we've had to drive the whole system, but that's now completed. And now we'll be able to match every single dropout that's known with a funding bucket and be able to progress that. The goal is to have a working list available for the first financial, for 1st of July, to initially kick things off funded work, so our supply chain have a steady amount of work. There's an awful lot of work to be done in that space. We're also interested in ensuring that there's a lot of alignment and agility between the teams, and that they share learnings. Because we've got so many and it'll take so long to do, we want to be really damn good at fixing these dropouts and making decisions. Some of our decisions are going to be potentially changing in the future too, but because of indications we're getting of reductions in fundings around emergency management, that is seriously going to impact. If that comes to fruition, that's seriously going to impact how we make decisions in keeping our network alive. And we'll have to seriously question whether we look to repair corridor items like dropouts to the level they were previously, where there is a risk that they will be lost again, or assessed risk. So in such cases, we might look to reduce the level of service of that corridor, so reducing it to a single lane for ports. That's an example of what that might look like. And that is done because, you know, some of these dropouts are easily into the hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix each time. And if there's a fair chance it's going to go in the next decade by some sort of assessment, then we need to be thinking about how many of these we maintain in So some of those hard-nosed decisions, we have to really start thinking about how we'll make them. So we want to use this period, though, to become the best corridor repair operators in the country, so not because we want to be the best, simply we just have to be. We don't have an option here. We've got a really stretched network. There's three ways you can help your situation. One of them is getting better. That's what I'm talking about there. The other one is reducing level of service, and the third one is asking for more money. And the third one looks like it's giving us pretty bad vibes. The second one is something we can consider in how we look at level of service. And the first one, just getting better, just needs to be employed, and it needs to involve the supply chain. That's what we're doing there. Right. More for me. I've done rock drop out bridges. Good.
Thanks, Tim. Community recovery plans. We've got the 20 plans in, supporting communities across Tairāwhiti to develop community recovery plans to capture their priorities and aspirations for recovery. Cyclone Gabriel at the community level. The team have got those in. Rena and the team are working back with the communities on that. We are comparing what are the common themes. We're looking at what's in the 3-year recovery plan, sort of the quick wins in that, and then what are the longer aspirations and how do we work through that with them. But the plans are welcome to be shared. The 20 plans that were shared with council, identified 6 more communities that we need to work with and to participate in that, and they're working through that. Some of the risks there is the time frame for completion of the plans. We did extend it out a couple of times, and which meant that we were actually going out with our 3-year recovery plan when the plans were coming in. So there was a bit of a crossover there, so we do need to work through that. So the next steps there are development of the Tairāwhiti Community Recovery Plan, testing the framework to share and track plans across council and ensure that we're going to get funding from and where we can get some philanthropic partnership funding from, and continue engaged with the communities that have not yet shared their plans. So that process is well underway, and is going to move to Anita's team. Anita will be working across that. Woody debris, everyone's topic there. You'll see when this went to print that we had 35.4 million for woody debris funding across our region. We've now got another 15 million that came in. We've just got that in at the bank a few days ago. The project has completed about 19% of the work and the woody debris out there, out of the 1.4 million cubic metres. Our active work sites are Te Arai, Uawa, Hikawai, Waipu, Waimiti and Pakarai, Whakatutu and Te Karakia. That's where we've mostly been working as our priorities. Weather conditions now will slow us down, and we've cleaned our beaches a couple of times, and as I sat home yesterday and watched all the wood go down the Waimata again yesterday, as you saw Ben too, and the emails that have come around, there was a lot of woody debris came back down our rivers yesterday, and what that means. So we have partnered with iwi on delivering this work, and that's gone really well. We've obviously cleaned our beaches a couple of times, and they'll be looking like they need to be cleaned again. The methodology and contractors will be scrutinised and validated to ensure delivery is of a quality standard and fit for purpose, making sure that work is happening. We're looking at ensuring that we've got a good forecast. We're working back with Te Amakura on what the forecast of woody debris looks like, so we know where we're going to go, and we actually need to start to work with central government on what the next funding element looks like. Central government is putting together a woody task force team, and council will be involved in that and what that means, and working with the region, which will be working then with central government, industry, local government, and some communities, I assume, where people will be involved, and iwi on that. So we look at how we deal with this product long term. The next slide there just gives you a bit of a update on where we are. You'll see that to date that we've extracted, while we haven't disposed of it, we've extracted 354,000 tonnes, estimated tonnes of woody debris. There's estimated in the catchments, those catchments that I just mentioned, that there's nearly 500,000. We've still got about 82,000 tonnes there to burn and get rid of it. But you'll see there that we're certainly around that 20-25% way of actually pulling that woody debris out of the catchments. But there's still a lot of high risk woody debris up in the catchments, and we're working through the process. But funding and a pathway to funding will next be our next issue on how we carry on, and we're working with the central government on what that looks like. So we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Telford, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, Rod, there's the recovery side of it, I think guys need to be commended for where we've got to. But there is one group of people that we keep, we know have fallen through the cracks of the whole process, and this is a group that don't fall into the Category 3 or the Category 2, but are cut off and isolated because of lost bridges, and we're really struggling to find a way to deal with that. Is there any work being done on that, or we can't?
It's probably best for Tim.
Yeah, in recognition of that, we've stood up one of our navigators is helping with the FOSA work. She's directly in contact with all those families so that we can react to their specific questions when they come to us. What qualifies them to be in the group that they're in is that things are worse now than they were a year ago, and that's something you correctly identified. Where most of the city, most of the region, things have improved in some measure, for them it has not, and we want to recognise that. So they are caught in the cracks, and they're caught in the decision cracks. Some of it's pretty challenging to deal with, one of them being they don't want to negotiate alternates until they've heard a clear message from the NZTA about what the funding will be, because they feel if they showed any weaker hand on what they're requesting, then that's exactly what they get. So that's one of the elements. The other elements that I've asked our support team to look at is working with other agencies to provide support for them. It's a welfare situation now, and we're an infrastructure delivery sort of group, recognising that that's not our particular strength. We've got to lean on other departments, and notably rural community ones, because these stakeholders run farms and businesses similar to that. So we don't think it's ideal, good, safe or smart to have people at advanced age crossing rivers at all. We can't stop them from doing that. So we're very exposed here, and as are they. We're concerned about the decisions they make at the water's edge next week, and what could happen. So what within the limitations of what we've got, just trying to be responsive to them. So those are the only people that I'll get straight back to when they request something.
And also adding to that, Tim, we made it very clear to them that we will lobby. So we've lobbied National Party locally, but also tomorrow I'm off to a transport, which I'm part of 6 mayors, a transport workshop as well, wherever I get the opportunity to put a plug in for funding coming our way, because what Tim just said is they are worse off than what they were a year ago. I can see the emotional and the financial impact on those families, and I do want to commend Tim and his team for trying to give wraparound support as much as a council can give, and reassuring them that we are trying to do whatever we can with each of those whānau and bridges. Tim and his team for the last year has tried to get some temporary access, which are less than ideal, but we are waiting for the budget announcement at the end of this month to know what's going to drop and what type of assistance from NZTA will be available. And that group as well has got the lovely Bridging Tairāwhiti group that are trying to give them that wraparound support, which maybe not sit with the council. So they are a group that are of concern to us as a council as a whole.
And I would point out too, because we've got 400 odd bridges that didn't fail but could have, we've got a precedent-setting elements that we'll have to consider. Once NZTA has advised us what we're funding, we need to, we're in the seat then to decide what will happen. So we have to be pretty mature in making those decisions. That's going to be level of service decisions in my view. Yeah.
Any more? Councillor Wharehinga, thank you.
Thank you very much, Worship. Full credit to the team, full credit to yourself, Your Worship, for going to bat for those communities who have fallen in those cracks, like in between the cracks, like what Councillor Tairāwhiti was saying. I'd also like to give full credit to those communities too for, you're right, like, yeah, for hanging in there, yeah, and keeping on using their voice. I know that it's tiring for them, but it's great trying to do the mahi in order to. I guess I do want to acknowledge too the kōrero that's coming out of our operations in regards to us making hard decisions. We've done this as a region for a long time around things like one lane decisions that would probably need to be making, levels of services decisions that we need to be making in terms of roads. We've known that for a long time. It's great to hear that kōrero coming out of our ops. I just wanted to ask a few questions just for clarity, just because I'm pretty sure I understand them, but I just want to make sure that if they are reported on, they're reported correctly. You were saying that in terms of woody debris, 19%, that 90% have been completed. That's 90% of the total, 90% of the budgeted.
Sorry, 90% of the work that's in those catchments that we only identified, only those few catchments we identified?
Yeah. So that's out of the entirety of the 1.4.
So that's about 20% of the whole. Yeah. Whole problem.
But not 19% of the budget. So we've exhausted. Like we've spent. We're on track in regards to our spending, right?
So we're on track to spend. So we were actually going through an extension to with our funding, because our funding was meant to be spent by the end of June. We've gone to extend that till the end of September, which government is just working through a process, and that'll be announced in the budget that we've got the extension to then. So that part's working through that. So we've worked through to actually the first 34 million that has been worked through, and now we're cooking into the next 15 million that we've just been awarded.
Yeah. I was certain that was my understanding too. So like so in essence, the entire 100% of that cleanup of that 1.4 million would essentially be 5 lots of that.
Yes.
30 million, right? So we're talking about 150 million.
Yeah, we've always got about, we're actually saying we've got still about $100 million problem there, and we've had about 50 million. Yeah. It's just what we've always sort of said from the way through.
Awesome. The other thing that I wanted to ask as well in regards to budget, Mr. Barry, was around the Greenbridge capital expenditure. You said it was that 1 million
for the whole lot.
For the whole lot.
About 30
budget.
About 1 million for a whole lot. Is about 30 really minor interventions. So we've got one contractor running through all of those.
Awesome. That's a nice tight number. We're talking a nice small number. We're talking about 150 all of the woody debris. I wanted to ask about timeframes, and when are we expecting to hear back? Is this after the budget bid from central government in regards to the TK flood resistance, flood resilience, and then also that $11 million general flood resilience? When are we expecting to hear back?
So flood resilience, we've probably got funding that came through in negotiations that the Dean led with central government around the Cat 3 buyout. So for flood resilience and flood protection, that fund money's, that's fine. What we're after from the next bit of funding is around our woody debris. There's probably 3 bits of funding that we need. One is around the recovery office and banging the Recovery Office for budget. The second one is around woody debris and what the woody debris forecast looks like in the shortfall, and the third one is around roading projects and what the roading looks like. So they're the three funding elements that we sort of got on the top of the table.
And the expected time frame for dollars in the bank?
Oh, look, I think it's a $64 million question. I think, I don't know what's in the budget. We're not getting any pre-budget announcements. If you're getting tapped on the shoulder, there's going to be an announcement. That's usually a good sign. If you're not getting tapped on the shoulder, it's not usually a good sign. That's not usually a good sign.
No guarantee.
Yeah, as your worship said. Yeah.
So just to help inform my conversations out in the community, the last thing I wanted to say is great work in regards to the community recovery plan and working with our communities around that. It was actually kind of like a silver lighting or positive benefit, I think, that there was that overlap with our 3-year plan, because when we were going out to communities were actively going, oh, that's a thing that you're doing? Well, we would like to do that too. So kind of started adding more active communities into that community recovery space. So I thought it was great. So yeah, thank you, team.
Councillor Pahuru-Huriwai and then Councillor Gregory.
Kia ora, no, thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, team, for that really great report. Just in regards to the whenua Māori Cat 3, why is it? What's the hold up? It's not with us. Who is the hold up with? And then my second question was just in regards to the beaches, and this is raised this several times. Unfortunately, you've got the debris coming down again, so those beaches you've already cleaned up will need to be cleaned up again, but there are beaches like Tairāwhiti that haven't yet been cleaned once. So is there a program somewhere that people, like how they have on the roading on the website, that all the roading updates there and where the work's being done, is there a similar one for the beach cleanups?
Yeah, kia ora. Through the chair, so Tairāwhiti is on the list to be done. So yes, it is there. The team is at Tikapa now, cleaning that beach up, and I'm working through that. So yeah, there is a program across beaches, and we can probably share that piece of work. So that's a good catch. So I'll talk to the team about getting an update. There is an update going in the paper which will come to councillors prior on Saturday, like the 2-page spreads that have been coming out, and that one is on woody debris, and so councillors will get that obviously on the Friday or Thursday, a couple of days prior. So, but that's a good catch. There is a program on the beaches, and we will ensure that Tairāwhiti is actually the next beach after Tikapa was meant to be finished.
Yep. And just a note there that the beaches we were holding in reserve for the winter months, because we can operate on those without the challenges that the hills provide in winter. So there was a purpose.
Thank you.
Last question, Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Just back to fossil, right at the start, Rob, you said that there might be a change on the green in a couple of weeks, and I was just wondering why that was. But also, just the numbers on your slide, you started off with 63 Cat 3, 12 whenua Māori and 51 other, which is fine, but then the next one had 54, and then the next slide had 66. And I'm just wondering where all these numbers come from.
No, sorry, I'll go through the slides.
They didn't add up at all, and it's
So-
confused me.
Okay, sorry, apologies. So 66 is the Cat 3, which there is 13 whenua Māori. Okay, so and to be fair, the numbers change quite often. So when they pull the data out, so that does with that one. On the Cat 2P lifting, there's 147, and 64 have applied for their house to get lifted. That's what that means there. So 64, and 33 are with Mahaki to lift. So they've got a contract with government themselves to lift that.
It's just the Cat 3 ones.
Oh, so you just went Cat 3?
I went from 63 to 66 in a couple of slides.
Okay.
So we'll just check those numbers because
Check
that
those numbers out for you.
come to all councillors via this report.
And so why was changed from green in a couple of weeks?
To be fair, there was some extra whenua Māori that came into the over the last couple of months, so I'll just check why those numbers have changed. You are correct. They did talk about 63 and they talk about 66, so I'll just find out why those numbers have changed.
And also why at the start you said that the green on the fossil might change in a couple of years. You know,
The
just,
green overall,
yeah, the light,
The
green
status.
the status of it, you mentioned that the green might change.
Oh, the green on, sorry, on this slide, sorry, I was talking about this slide here, where as more people apply, the green slide changes, that's what I'm referring to, sorry. Apologies, because it did jump from, we did go from Cat 3 to Cat 2, then back to Cat 3, so apologies, yes.
Okay, last question, councillor Pahuru
Go
Huriwa.
through the numbers with you.
You've got, and they will look at those numbers and make sure when it comes to us, because we will receive a copy of that presentation, just double check the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Pahuru Huriwa, you wanted to ask about whenua Māori.
Yeah, sorry, I did ask it in the beginning of my previous question, was just around the whenua Māori Cat 3. What, and you said it's frustrating for the whānau that are involved. Of course it would be. Where is the hold up there?
So it's through DPMC and them agreeing a process. My understanding is they are working with Hawke's Bay Properties first, and then coming to us. So that's where they've seemed to have put their priority. They came to us and asked for feedback on how we had done our Cat 3, and we've sent them our policy, we've sent them all information. We actually offered that all up in November, early on prior to Christmas. We've now sent it again, haven't we, Dr. Murray? So we've sent it a couple of times to them, and we're now waiting for them to come back to us on what the process is and how they're going to work through that. So it is pretty frustrating, and it's frustrating for the communities.
Oh, well, thank you for keeping on top of that on their behalf. It's shocking, really, on the part of DPMC, but thank you.
And that, just to be clear, those are two total processes. People can choose to be part of our process or part of the whenua Māori process, which is not run by us. It's run by DPMC. We did offer to give our policy and everything there. So we are receiving feedback that there's a bit of frustration there, but we'll keep our eyes across that. Councillors, without further ado, I am happy to move the recovery update, seconded by Councillor
Yes.
Wharehinga. Any more questions or queries? All in favour?
Aye.
Can you ask your question when I ask? Are there questions? So please do that. Go for gold.
Look, this is probably more of a something for maybe operations to look at, but I'm just wondering whether it's timely, considering what's happened with the bridges in the district, is to have a look, because we've got the policy where we don't self-insure the bridges. I'm just wondering whether there's a timely exercise to do to have a look at our district bridges where we've got these bridges going to communities where potentially, because of the number of people now living there, and a lot of people have left those areas because of the land use change into forestry, maybe you haven't actually got people, which then becomes some of the reason why decisions are made, whether they're funded, whether it's just a model that we could look at of identifying those groups of bridges that would probably fall out of government funding or whatever, that maybe we look at coming back to us with a cost of what the insurance, maybe insuring those group of bridges, because this is not going to be the last time we were stuck in this situation.
I can comment on the insurance situation. I don't know now.
Yep.
It was a decision that was made in the past, prior to CE's back, and the only bridges that we were insuring was Peel Street in Gladstone and Peel Street, and this one over here. And the reason for that was it was just too cost prohibitive to insure all the bridges, and that would be a higher rate of emergency funding to be able to reinstate those bridges. So given where we are now, and the emergency rate may be changing, and we've got issues around how now NZTA have their funding provisions, that we should look at it. I would say that it's probably going to be significant in terms of costs for us to insure, but that is a finance conversation that needs to come from that committee.
Thank you for raising that.
If I can add a response to that. So along with insurance, I think it's a really important thing to look at. We want to use our bridge group rebuilding program to also ask the same parties undertaking that to have a look at the bridges that didn't fail, and then potentially look at potential interventions we could do to make them more robust. Would be in a totally different situation had we lost 2 of 8, right? Also, this is a bridge stock which represents only 2% of our bridge stock total, yet we're unable to fund it, which tells us something about asset management and how we apportion funds. But had we made some interventions so that knowing how they fail now, the decks lift off, the foundations mobilise, there might be relatively low-cost interventions which reduce that possibility should another event come. They might be worth making in lieu of insurance, which just covers you. This is actually, how do you make it more robust, what we've got, cheaply? So we have to have all these discussions in tandem with also considering targeted rates and other approaches that could fund potential insurance to these areas. So it's a broad thing, which also includes what physical things we might do to our existing stock of assets to make them more robust. So that's something we're looking at as well.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, I've got a mover myself, Councillor Wharehinga, page 44. All in favour? Aye. Contrary carried. Councillors, look who has come to visit us. Lovely Dallas Haynes. Not the loveless.
Jelly.
The lovely Dallas Haynes. Welcome, Dallas. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, Worship.
I'm going to hand over to you, and you will talk to us a little bit more about the welfare coordination.
Yes, so yes, thank you, Worship. So there's been a lot of activity in the welfare coordination group and wider groups, focusing on the 4 R's of emergency management. We do a lot of work in the last 2, but we don't seem to put any effort into the first 2 R's around reduction and readiness. So that was the whole idea around the restructure and cluster groups and aligning groups to the lead agencies, and actually getting lead agencies to take responsibility and readiness, not only in response. I'd also like to just highlight the amount of training that has been rolled out. The needs assessment training has been really successful. The number I've got in there is 22 training sessions, but I've now done another 4 since I wrote this paper. So that's been really successful, and the whole purpose of that is to impart knowledge and understanding around what welfare actually means and how you can implement them and how we can maintain the coordination piece of our welfare provision. And I'm happy to take any questions, but I just want to also speak to the welfare forum that we had yesterday.
Yes.
Just under 50 people turned up for the forum. The theme that we sort of ran with yesterday was needs assessment, getting everyone on the same level. We had gaps in knowledge. We had people at different levels of understanding. So the whole purpose of yesterday was to bring everybody up to the same level, which was really good. And we did, Ian actually came through for it yesterday and talked around the section 77, which a lot of people didn't understand, so that was great. And then we did a needs assessment exercise in the afternoon. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts happening in the welfare coordination group. Something that I didn't get an opportunity to put into this report, Councillor Tairāwhiti, just to acknowledge what you mentioned earlier around the rural advisory group. We're actually been talking, Ben and myself have been talking to a couple of members, and we're going to hold a rural advisory group forum at the centre in the very near future and bring everybody in so we can reset in terms of coordination and how they can participate in response and what activities can take place in this as well. So we're really looking forward to that piece of mahi. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions for Dallas? So we're on page 51. Your hands? Oh, Rawinia, thank you.
Oh, I don't have any parts. I just want to acknowledge the really good mahi happening in the welfare space to bring together all the counterparts and all the partners and all the relationships and all the keen community links. Welfare is a really complex, fast-moving, high-emotion space, and I was really lucky enough to participate in one of the needs assessments training. It really has gone from strength to strength in comparison to Cyclone Gabriel, where we are now, where the needs assessment is, what kind of information we'll get out of that, how we resource it, and who will participate. So really, really want to acknowledge Dallas and her leadership in creating that for us. No questions, happy to move the paper.
Fantastic, and yes, Dallas, that comes from a rural voice, from a city-bound voice as well. I'm happy to second that. We have seen firsthand the work that you and your team, for months and months and months after the cyclone, dealt one-on-one with whānau that needed support, whānau with no homes or living in temporary accommodation, needing some help, and you guys went above and beyond. So now is also the time to recognise the fabulous work you have done, but also the great work you keep on doing, trying to prepare whānau better for when things come their way, and also our system. So when we are in a situation like that, it is easier for you and your teams as well. So thank you. Also convey the thanks to your team. Thank you. Okay. There are no more questions. We've got a mover in Councillor Parata, a seconder, myself. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you, everyone. I do thank you for coming today. Thank you, Mr. Ben Green. As always, thank your team for the wonderful work they do and about our community. And I now declare this meeting closed.